You're Between Two Dumbbells. I'm your host, Skip Hill, and I'm bringing over 40 years of bodybuilding experience to the table, including over 24 years of online coaching. I'm joined today via satellite by my co-host, Dr. Marv, aka The Educated Meathead. For each show, we posit a thought about a training exercise, a training methodology, and then we deep dive into the minutia. We might argue and debate, or we might agree and tell each other how smart we both are. But at the end of the discussion, we both decide if we smash or pass the topic of the day. Of course, I'm going to be reminded by Dr. Marv to smash or pass the topic of the day, but that's pretty typical too. Today, I'm going to do something a little different. I got a new segment. I'm excited. I don't know anybody else will, but I am the Cookie Monster. I know where to go to get great cookies online, which online companies are good, have great cookies, and which ones suck. So I'm going to basically, I don't know, critique, I guess, for lack of a better word, one cookie company each show, because cookies are an awesome cheat meal or something to add to a cheat meal, arguably a skip load for bodybuilders. And if you don't believe me, some of these, actually most of these cookie companies, you'll see who's following them on Instagram. Nick Walker's in there. A lot of bodybuilders, a lot of pros. They're all following them because they all want them cookies, not just regular cookies, but gourmet cookies. So I know where to go. So I'm going to try that today. We'll see how it goes. If it sucks, we'll drop it, but we're going to try it out. We're also going to answer listener questions as usual. And remember, every time you comment on the show on YouTube, you'll be included in a drawing at the end of each month to win a $150 shopping spree for EliteFTS.com, 5 pounds of TEAMSKIP Protein from TrueNutrition.com, and you'll receive Dr. Marv's online bodybuilding anatomy course. The more times you respond, the better your chances of winning. We'll post the winner for the month on my Intense Muscle IG account, and we'll also reach out to the winner via their YouTube account. Dr. Marv, I posit today, this is going to be a good one. I always say it's going to be a good one. I have to not say that.
Yeah.
But
there's no bias whatsoever.
No.
There's no bias whatsoever.
No, I'm the smartest guy I know. Every show we do is the greatest show we've ever done.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's my posit for today. We all know that deloads are essential for training. But here's the caveat, and I think this is important. I think this is what a lot of people miss. I posit that deloads should be taken proactively, consistently, almost on a regular basis versus reactively. That does not mean that they can't be taken reactively, but there are reasons to take them reactively. And I want to talk about the difference between when you take it proactively, when you take it reactively. And I want your thoughts on it. What do you think?
Love it. I always did reactive my whole training career, except for the last 2 years. And I'm like, why did I not do this before? Because we love to train. That's why. And people think they're going to lose all their strength and size. Like we've talked about multiple times, after 7 days, if you do no training, you will deflate. It's not muscle tissue. It's water inflammation. It's that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy that we did an entire discussion on. So once people learn to not be reactive and be proactive, once you do it a couple cycles, like you're going to have to figure out your interval between deloads, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Like once you see the benefit, it's like one of, those light bulb moments in your training career when you do it as long as you and I have, and like not training people, but just lifting in the gym. Like, you're like, why the hell was I so resistant to this?
Right. It's big picture shit. Basically, it's looking down the pike, seeing the benefit of it and understanding. Plus, there's a psychological component, like you said. It's like, well, I'm training, everything's going well. I'm going to go another week. I don't have any aches or pains. Man, I'm progressing. I've got a bunch of energy. That's sometimes the best time to take a deload. And I want to point this out too. Part of the psychology is, if we take this time off, we're going to lose muscle. You touched on that. I get it. I understand why someone would think that, But at the same time, that's not what happens. 9.5 out of 10 times, you should be able to come back from a proactive deload and be stronger the following week. And some people be like, oh, I didn't train that hard this week, because I deloaded last week. What? That's when you need to be bringing it. The contractile force, the pumps, everything should be great. Your joints should feel like $1 million. In fact, it's the proactive deloads that made me think, this was a couple years ago, I should train every other week. Because when I take a deload week, I come back and I feel like $1 million. I've touched on that green room reference where those sets, green room is a reference that surfers used to use when they hit the perfect wave and everything is just exactly how it's supposed to be. And everything is kind of in slow motion. And you wish every wave, or for us, every set was like that. That's how your set should be and how you should feel when you come back from a deload. Now, arguably, it'd be great to feel like that all the time. But if you put in 41 years of training, by the second or third week back after a deload, you're like, oh, it's just not the same as that first week. So again, we all know that deloads are essential. Taking them, when to take them, we battle with it. I'll have clients they'll blast for 14, 18, 22 weeks. I'm like, and then they're complaining about, well, I just, I'm not progressing much. The pumps aren't there. Like, you're in the off season. You're in a surplus. There is no good reason for this to be, when was and I already know the answer. I asked a lot of questions I already know the answer to. When was the last time you took a cruise week? And I already know it says 18 weeks, but they don't want to take them for that reason, that psychological battle that we have. Or I hear this a lot. I'm not going into the gym if I'm not going 100%. And I'll admit, I've said it. Sometimes it's hard to go into the gym and train at less than 100%. But again, it's big picture shit. So you have to be able to pull back. And I want to talk about with the deloads, not only the ideology around it and the studies and the things that you have from the academia side, but I want to talk about what they should look like, because I don't think a lot of people understand what they should look like and how to program them with a little bit more of a black and white structure to it. Thoughts?
Yeah. Why don't we go down the data? Because there is actually two different types of deloads that have been studied in bodybuilders and powerlifters. So we could talk about the opposing camps and then what we do. Because what do most people do, though? Let's talk about reactive first. Most people look for the signs that you've overcooked yourself. So for us, losing motivation to train is big. Sleep or mood disturbances. You've already touched on it. Less strength, less mind to muscle connection. You've got
even
a bunch
HRV.
As usual, beating me to the punch. HRV or something else that I want to put on people's radar is called a CNS finger tap test. On the screen is the picture of the $2 app, or it was $2 when I bought it like 5 years ago. It might be $7 now. It's not a total substitution of HRV, but it's a nice thing where you get a baseline where you're going to tap your finger for 10 seconds on your phone, both sides, you get your baseline and you compare it. It's another way to see what your nervous system is recovering.
Nice.
So that's cheap, because HRV can be expensive. I used to use my phone until they changed where the camera and the lights are. So the ones you used to just use your phone, I don't find nearly as accurate. I did spend money, I get no money saying this, on Morpheus, which is an HRV chest strap that I like. The one thing I do not like is you can only do HRV once per day. That's the one thing I'm not a huge fan of. Again, when I bought it several years ago, it was $100. But I'm sure there's other options, but HRV fatigue, and then you're getting sick or illness or stuff. The example was a couple weeks ago. Skip knows I'm under arguably the most stress I've ever been in my life, and my immune system was in the shitter. I got an eye infection out of nowhere. I kept getting sick every other week. And even you were like, dude, you got to be careful in the gym right now.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, I don't want you to go to jail either. So I really hope it works out.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But I chose to I didn't train. I didn't even attempt to deload. A lot of times when people are that beat up, I go, just do blood flow restriction, do
Yeah.
something. I just chose not to train at all. Now, was that the best move in hindsight? Probably not, because my attitude got even worse. So now that I'm back to training somewhat, duh. But again, you've got to make those judgment calls. But most people wait for those warning signs that they've gone too far. And what you and I are both saying is, how about we don't wait till everything is shit and actually program them in? And we'll talk about intervals because everybody's different. But yeah, I'm with you. I like having set intervals, but we'll talk about that in the future. So let's just dive into the research unless
Let me
you have
add
something
one
else.
thing real quick,
Yeah.
just about the reactive in case we don't come back to it. One thing I do believe in when it comes to reactive deloading for training is that is a good time sometimes to just not train at all. Because people will ask me like, oh, during a deload, do I train? Do I train like? I'm not a big proponent of not training. If you feel like you're overtrained, take a couple days. You might need an extra rest day. Okay, cool. But if you're going to take an entire week off, that to me is you've gotten to the point where you need a reactive deload so badly that you actually need the time away to allow your CNS, your body, your immune system, everything to recover. And sometimes that week, if you're in a bad spot, that week will still allow you to come back stronger that following week. But during a proactive or a regular deload week, I don't believe in not training. I just want to get that in there because I don't know if we'll come back to the reactive.
Yeah. And yes, this is a training podcast, but nutritionally, don't go on a steep deficit on your deload. That is defeating the whole freaking purpose.
Yeah. Recovery is the number one issue during a deload. The last thing you want to do is lower the nutrients with your nutrition that are helping to feed and maximize and optimize the recovery that you're not at 100%.
Yep.
Agreed.
And
100%.
say you're in a prep like Skip is, who's going to blow people's mind with his conditioning coming up here. Like, even if you're in a prep, go to maintenance calories. Bare minimum. I would prefer a slight surplus. You're getting a diet break, which we have tons of research about diet breaks. Now, yes, if you're enhanced, you could be doing other things to make sure thyroid doesn't go down. It's more important for natural guys and gals on prep, but still, I would prefer a 200 to 400 calorie surplus per day. You're going to increase your micronutrient intake with fruits and veggies, especially if you're doing, chicken and rice. Man, that week, add stuff that you agree with. So don't force broccoli. If you become a methane producing lab, that clears a room, right? But use this time to let the body recover, feed itself. Any fluctuations in appearance and stuff, that's all water. It's going to come right off, and you'll probably come back leaner, right? Because you're stoking the fire. So again, that's a mistake I see all the time. So I wanted to make sure we brought that up. Yeah.
And inflammation is usually down during a deload as well as you get deeper into that deload week. So sometimes you're going to actually look better.
Yep.
Because your body's starting to fill out a little bit, and it's it'll have more of a rested look versus that look.
Yeah, I find a lot of people will start getting a little bit of water retention the first few days, and then it just drops off, and it's almost like you took a mild diuretic where you're like, holy cow. Cortisol, we call it your RAAS for short, your renin angiotensin aldosterone system. Say that 10 times fast. Water hormones, that's going to positively shift. So yeah, it's crazy from an aesthetic standpoint, let alone recovery and feel good. But I like the Renaissance Periodization's hypertrophy book, their definition of a deload. So I'm going to read it verbatim, and then we'll go into data. And I took data from multiple camps. So it's cool to see how different people do it, both in bodybuilding and Olympic lifting and track and field, blah, blah, blah. So Renaissance Periodization, deload phase. It's an entire and there goes my headphone. It only happens when we're doing this. An entire microcycle composed of lower volume, load, and relative effort sessions, the purpose of which is to reduce fatigue while preserving adaptations. Deloading, if long enough, is used to allow recovery of more lingering training consequences such as hormonal alterations, which we'll talk about, and microtrauma to connective tissues. I just think
Okay.
that's a really sweet way. So in an anonymous survey in the sports and Olympic lifting world, over 200 strength coaches talked about what they do with their elite athletes. And it's a little bit differently than what we do. So typically, the most common practice is you're going to reduce training volume by about 25%. It's only 1 or 2 sessions per week, 30 to 60 minutes per session. And in the Olympic lifting world, they're doing 1 to 3 sets of 1 to 6 repetitions, right? They're not going to failure. They're not doing anything crazy. Now, we know that short term, now, and I just want to be very clear, unfortunately, I could only read the abstract in the study. I couldn't gain access to the full thing, but the abstract was pretty detailed. I would have liked more info, but it just shows like that's typically what they do in that world where they're cutting stuff, not a ton, only by 25%, but the number of sessions is dramatically reduced. And it seemed like most of them really focused on shortening the duration of the workout, right? So, which I like. We do know that short-term reductions in training load after intense training in competitive weightlifters, so Olympic weightlifters, shown to restore performance, such as a snatch and a vertical jump in the study. And they did like surveys of the athletes. They said, their mood improved dramatically and all that stuff. Again, they are a lot more proactive in strength sports than bodybuilders are.
Agreed.
Right? Oh God, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Mitchell Hooper, one of the smartest strongmen in the world. I believe he does a deload every 3 or 4 weeks, period.
Nice.
Right? And that's one of the strongest people and one of the smartest people in the world. In strongman, I defer to him. In power, now there's obviously other really good people, but man, you want to learn a ton, learn from him. Powerlifting, I love Matt Wenning. Like there's a million guys, but like those guys, they're playing chess, not checkers.
Yep.
Take some cues from them. Now, in the world of bodybuilding and in powerlifting, it was really cool where they compared, and they had a couple studies, compared what they called a step taper to a gradual taper. A step taper is dramatically decreasing the total volume by 40 to 55%, but you keep the intensity high, and it's a short period of time. A gradual taper is you slowly lower the volume over 1 to 3 weeks. An example they gave specifically was a 2-phase gradual taper where the first week they reduced volume by 38%, the second week by 70%, but they kept training intensity high, which is interesting because I do things a little bit differently. But when you compare the two head to head, the step taper, the dramatic reduction in volume for a shorter period of time, usually 1 week, had greater improvements in maximal strength when you're rechecking 1 rep max in powerlifter squat, bench, and deadlift. They had increased neuromuscular performance, so their EMG activity went up in a study, which is pretty cool. That's what you were talking about, right? That mind to muscle, the contractions.
Yep.
Hormonal changes increased favorably, especially your ratio of testosterone to SHBG, cortisol, and all of that. Side note, in a military study, just 3 days of returning to normal living restored the testosterone ratio in the subjects, right? So like even our military, for our special ops guys, they go 3 days, nothing. Like, let's restore that, then we'll get you back in the field. Again, significantly more important for natural folks, but it still applies to enhanced, right? Just because you have an outside source, it doesn't mean cortisol. All this other stuff is still getting messed with.
Well, I think that's an important thing to note because I do get a lot of kickback from clients when they say, well, I'm on cycle. Well, there is this misconception that because you're on cycle that you're not going to overtrain. That's laughable. I don't even know where that came from. Obviously, your recovery is going to be more optimal. It's going to be better. But
I would argue you're in more. Yeah,
go ahead.
I think you could overtrain more as an enhanced person because of that. Plus, you're pushing loads heavier than you normally would.
Right. Yeah.
People
psychologically, it's there. Most people train harder and more consistently when they're on cycle. So, and then there's a bunch of little rabbit holes, but one of them is if you're not going to change your training, programming, ideology, how you approach the training coming off of cycle, you're going to be the first one complaining, I'm not keeping my gains. Oh, I feel like crap. I can't stand not being on cycle. If you're making the correct adjustments to compensate for your recovery not being as well after those blood levels start to taper off, because the first 3-4 weeks of coming off a cycle, especially if you're going to TRT, no big deal. You're going to be able to still train pretty much the same way you've been training while you were on cycle.
I know a thing or two about training, but I've built a reputation in the bodybuilding industry for removing skin. If you have too much skin, call me. Remember, skin is overrated.
There'll be a gradual decrease, and it typically starts around the 6th week of coming off. It takes time, but you have to make those adjustments. And if you make the proper adjustments, you can grow great and recover great on TRT or off cycle, as long as you make those changes to compensate and make sure that recoveries. Are you going to grow like you will on cycle? Of course not. Can you continue to grow and progress? You absolutely should be. You absolutely should be.
Anecdotally, when are a lot of PRs set? The first few weeks when you're coming off, because stress from the outside drugs is coming down, right? When are most people's PRs? Not on, it's those first few weeks off. And I know that's not the scope of this podcast, but it shows the importance of it. Back to step versus gradual, and I just have a few more studies and we'll have our discussion. Step tapers versus gradual also resulted in increased cross-sectional of type 2 muscle fiber. So remember, you're letting the body catch up, just like we recorded, it hasn't come out yet, where we talked about bicep training, where you quit overtraining your biceps, they'll start growing, right? So that showed step tapers are better for muscle growth overall. Now, both of them, the gradual and the step taper, are obviously, effective for recovery, but that dramatic step taper for a shorter period of time seemed to outperform the gradual. Plus, I don't know about you, I don't want to do a 3-week deload. I want to get in, get out. So there's that. Now, in powerlifting, right, they do way more of this because they're peaking for competition. Same with strongman. The step tapers just dramatically outperformed it. And then also, this study was interesting, saying 2 to 4 days of stopping training altogether after a deload and then going back to training seemed to enhance maximal strength without negatively impacting body composition or recovery. It did seem, though, that 2 days was the best if you want pure strength, because at a 4-day, in this study, or several studies that are on the page, 4 days saw a slight decrease in bench press performance. So it's finding that Goldilocks zone of, do your deload, take just a handful of days off if you're peaking for pure strength. But again, it shows you got to pay attention to your body. There is no cookie cutter, but proactively designing them into your program are awesome. And once again, muscle hypertrophy is awesome. We know that periodized training is superior to non-periodized training. By periodized training, I'm meaning you're deloading, right? You're building up volume or intensity, right? You're overreaching, then you're deloading. And then you're overreaching, the blasting and cruising, not drugs, training. Training blast, training cruises are vastly superior. Deload weeks restore performance and mood state, right? Across the board, it reduces markers of muscle damage and strength, right? And we know that active deloads, where you're just reducing volume, and passive deloads, which means you're completely resting, they're both effective. There's very minimal biochemistry differences. So again, do what you like. And the last thing, two more things that I lost I'm sorry, I'm reading notes because I'm on the road. Now, how do you set this up? How do you prevent injury when you're coming back, right? That's the next big caveat. Do we want to have that discussion, or do you want to comment on what I just said first?
No, let's have that discussion. Go ahead.
Okay. Yep. So on the screen is something that is shameless plug. It's from my performance pyramid hierarchy seminar. That is for purchase. Haha. It's what I gave at a very high-end powerlifting gym. It's essentially my life's work. And a big thing was injury prevention and something called acute to chronic workload ratios. Now on the screen, you can see the graph from the study. For simplicity, just to get the point across. It's much easier if I just apply this to an arbitrary number of 10. So we could just call it 10 hours of training or whatever you want to call it, right? With endurance runners, it's easy to say 10 miles. So what you see on the graph is you have this sweet spot, you have this yellow spot, and you have the danger zone. So what this is saying acute to chronic workload ratios. This is one of the most important things I teach to all my endurance athletes, but for bodybuilders, powerlifters, everybody, it's really important. So acute to chronic workload ratios. Acute is the proposed volume you want to do for 1 week, right? So you come off a deload, what do you want to do the next week? Chronic is the average of the last 4 weeks. So let's just say you've averaged 10 hours of training, right? You would divide them and it would give you a ratio. As you could see, you could go from 0.8, which would be 8 hours of training, so a slight deload, right? Not the dramatic, but slight, up to 1.3, so 13 hours. You could fluctuate within that range, and your injury risk, according to the data, is as low as it's going to get.
Okay.
Once you go from 1.3 to 1.5, right, 13 to 15, you're getting a little iffy, but still acceptable. But once that ratio goes over 1.5, your injury risk goes up sevenfold.
Oh,
So again, we don't want these huge training spikes in volume, right? That's how you get hurt. And we've got to be very careful of what you're doing when you're coming back from a deload. What I typically recommend, if you're somebody who's logbook driven like I am, you're not going to just pick up at the loads and the reps that you did right before your deload. I want you going back 2 to 3 rotations in your logbook, right? And start with those numbers. Start with that volume, right? Because you should be increasing as you go. I agree with you. You're going to be strong as an ox when you come back. But if you just set a lifetime PR of 405 for 10 on back squats and then you deloaded, I don't want you putting 405 back on the bar immediately. Go back a couple weeks. Maybe you did 385 2 rotations ago. Start there and then restart your progression over.
okay. Now, are you talking about coming off of a reactive or passive versus?
I proactive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I want slightly less, which might be different than you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm also more progressive overload driven than you are. But I do want to
Right.
just make one clarification because I'm getting a lot of questions, people reaching out to me. I am progressive overload king, but that doesn't mean it's shit form using your whole body. It's still using the target muscle, right? So yes, I want to get better every time, but let's just say a perfect example is my chest. Yes, I could press 270 on a machine, but I don't have that mind and muscle connection, right? So I'm going to try and have massive contractions every single rep, every single set, and progress that. If I go from 250 to 270 and I don't feel it in my chest, I haven't earned the right to use that weight. So I'm going to drop down and keep working till I can get that 270 to feel it in the working muscle. That is the hardest thing to get across with progressive overload because it's not beat the rep book, the log book by any means necessary, which means not using other muscles. It's still using your primary muscle. And that takes a lot of self-control and discipline. So in my logbook, I'll be like, this was a little bit too heavy. I need to lower it back to my previous load and work on getting that muscle to contract the same way. That's the hard thing, right? Because a lot of people are saying, well, I'm beating the logbook, but nothing is growing because you're using every muscle possible. You
Right.
still want the target muscle to do the work. That is the hardest thing. But the whole point of bringing up the acute to chronic workload ratios is you don't want to spike your training volume, right? And then just be really smart when you come back from a deload. Just because you feel great doesn't mean you're going to all of a sudden do lifetime high volumes your first week back. You still got to be smart and progress safely.
I think that's from the sounds of it, that's the biggest difference, I think, between your approach and my approach coming off of a deload. I do want to take advantage of the strength increase, the increased contractile force, but I will fall back on this. The TEAMSKIP training protocol is set up on essentially a 7-week cycle where 6 weeks you're blasting, the 7th week you deload. For the first 2 weeks, it goes in increments of 2 weeks. So the first 2 weeks, the volume is the lowest. The middle 2 weeks, it goes up. And the last 3 weeks is, like we were talking about earlier, arguably an extension past the volume that you would otherwise use or benefit from. And most people will say it's just a lot of volume. I feel pretty beat up. That's okay, unless you're just absolutely destroyed. That last couple of weeks of the blast is meant to push further than what you're accustomed to or what your body could 100% recover from optimally. Then you take the 7th week and you deload, which brings you back to the baseline volume. And then when you start the 6-week blast over again, you're starting at that same volume, which is low, just like the same volume of the deload, the lowest amount of volume, and then you're building again. So the reason I lay that out is because the volume, like you were touching on earlier with the studies, the volume comes down. But that's why I want to take advantage of that strength. Again, much like you described, you're not going in to just by any means necessary move bigger weight. You still want that targeted muscle. That's the biggest difference between bodybuilding and powerlifting, quite frankly. Powerlifting is, yes, the mechanics need to be there so that you're green lighted, but it's moving a weight from point A to point B. I don't care if your quads do the work when you're bench pressing. As long as that the mechanics there and you're green lighted, move that weight from point A to point B. Bodybuilding is exactly the opposite of that. So maybe not exactly the opposite, but there's not a lot of parallels there with the training. We're looking for that stimulus. We're looking to dig into the target muscle as much as possible. So the strength of the poundage becomes almost secondary. So I still want to take advantage because, again, it's still a progressive overload. I'm not a progressive overload king anymore. I do think there's great things with progressive overload. I had benefited from it for years, but I also don't think it's the last word when it comes to growth and hypertrophy. So arguably, I'm more of a time under tension guy, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. But. So what's funny is you do the 6-week training blast. I typically program 8-week training blast with deload on the 9th. I typically don't increase volume unless it is a volume RIR program. I typically keep the volume the same and I'm increasing load as my progression, but you could even increase load or volume. So we go about it different. You're more increasing volume over time. I'm more increasing load with volume being the same, but it's still the same. You can get to the top of the hill the same way.
Absolutely. Yep.
But yeah, so like I'm only doing, so we're very similar of proactive deloads where I'll go 8 weeks and then a deload. That's my generic starting out with people. Then we see what they need. So we're not that far off. You'll increase volume. I increase load. So there's 2 different ways to do it. Yes. But I have started playing around with increasing volume, not load, and it's been interesting. And my joints feel a little bit better. I'm going to be perfectly honest, right? So, like, again, I know I would benefit from more of your style training. It's just nails on a chalkboard boring to me.
Sure. No, I totally get it.
And I get that.
On the other side of the coin, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
We can't train together.
We're both being stubborn in how we like to do it.
Sure.
I did do a volume RIR, increasing volume over time last year. There's other things that play, but I got my biggest. I got just under 250 last year, and it was doing that, right? It's a de novo stimulus. There's different ways to do it. I remember when you did your 1 week on, 1 week off. I did something similar to where it's 1 week of progressive overload, 1 week of volume alternating, right? So I'm only hitting failure every other week as a way to play around with it because that was my happy medium of doing what I still love, but doing what I know I probably should be doing.
Sure.
And that was great. I also played around with almost like Dr. Scott Stevenson of, when I was pairing 2 muscle groups, progressive overload chest, volume RIR pump sets back, and then vice versa. I just found I prefer to do, this is just me, I prefer to do, okay, this is my progressive overload week, this is my volume RIR week. Mixing them up in the same workout psychologically for me, I like the gun in the head mentality, but then I know on my volume days or my volume weeks, man, I'm going in there, I'm just going to have a ton of fun. I'm going to jokingly train like a California pro, a bunch of pump stuff, be a meathead, play around with weird movements, create all this weird stuff people see me do, throwing up. So yeah, it's pretty funny how you would benefit from my style of training. I would benefit from your style of training, but we're not going to do it.
Right. Exactly. And I
Yeah.
want to expound on, because you brought this up, and I think people listening may not know about the experiment that I did to prove my point with Deloads. What I did was, for almost 16 weeks, I trained like I normally train for 1 week. And then I took what is essentially a reactive or passive deload the next week. Literally was deloading by not training at all every other week. And the reason I did that was because for the last handful of years, I would think, man, every time I come back from a week off, whether it's scheduled or I'm out of the country or whatever, I just felt like $1 million. And I always said, God, it'd be really nice to have those workouts all the time. And I always wondered, I'm like, gosh, what would happen? And I'm an experiment guy. I'm like, man, I got to try this. So I had time before, I had a kind of a longer off season before I was going to start prep. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. It worked incredibly well for about 8 to 10 weeks physically, as far as like I was growing and progressing, if not the same, slightly more than when I was training weekly. However, a couple things came into play that I did not anticipate. Number one, how frustrating when you're traveling or have a vacation where it just seems that the luck of the draw is your training week is while you're out of town. And you can't just change it. You can't go, well, I'm going to do this, because then it's going against the structure of the 1 week on, 1 week off. So then you're just getting into this mess of a lack of structure that isn't black and white. So that was frustrating. Or let's say you get sick or something, it throws everything off as well, because you really think, you know, I've only got a week to train and then I'm not going to train. So you do tend to train harder. No, you're not going to leave anything on the table. It worked really well until I kind of adapted to it, which is, when you think about it, that's what happens anyway with every program that we do. What I liked was it worked. It worked in the sense that even when I didn't progress better, I didn't progress worse. And that was a big deal, because if you think about it, you're training 50% of the time. You know how much more shit you get done when you're not training?
Yeah. I bet your joints felt way better. Did your joints feel better?
Like $1 million.
Yeah.
Strength was through the roof. Green room sets, everything was fluid. Everything was smooth. Everything was great. Would it work in a deficit? I don't know. You would be maximizing recovery. It could.
Yeah.
But it might be a little difficult to do in a prep, which is one of the reasons that I said it at that time and did it.
Yeah.
But for those who don't know, that's what you were referencing. And I'm glad that I tried it. It's one of those things where, look, if you're going to hire somebody, this isn't an ad, but if you're going to hire somebody, you want somebody who has experimented and done those things outside of the box. And that's what I got noticed for over 20 years ago in the industry, because I remember hearing things, oh, fruit is only stored as glycogen in the liver. It cannot be stored as skeletal glycogen. What?
Yeah.
So then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to load my carb days on only fruit. Worked incredibly well. Now, I had sores in my mouth because eating that much acidic fruit will get to you, but it tasted good other than the sores in my mouth. But those are the types of things that I challenged early on. It's always, I think that's a reason that I drifted towards coaching early on. I just wanted to learn so much, and I wanted to challenge, and I invite and encourage people to challenge, whether you're coaching or not, challenge what is known, because a lot of things in this industry, especially back then, were accepted with no good reason. And those things needed to be challenged, because I was able to come away from a lot of those things and go, that's garbage. That's crap. We should have never believed that, because that doesn't make any sense. And then there were other things that you just go, that's legit.
Yeah.
That works.
Two caveats. One, Yeah, well, yeah, you always want somebody who's experimenting. I will never ask somebody to do something I haven't done, and I know you're the same way.
Yeah, no
Yep,
question, no question.
correct.
And that is not common in the industry, and I don't like that. That's part of the giant sea of turds.
Yep.
When people, the vast majority of trainers, and I don't want to get off on a rant here, but the vast majority of trainers these days don't have the knowledge and the experience. They have taken information from other trainers, even top trainers, or people that would be considered top trainers that I don't consider top trainers. A lot of that information is just taken from other coaches.
It's parroted.
Exactly. So they don't, or they're advising on things that they haven't done. If I'm going to pay someone and I'm going to trust someone with my progress and my health, I don't want them to be guessing or take that information. I want them to know firsthand how they and how other clients respond to what they're asking me to do. And they better be able to explain why they're asking me to do it. Because if your trainer can't explain why, there's two main reasons, basically two reasons, and that's it. Number one, they don't know the answer. So they say, oh, just trust the process or some other bullshit. Or they don't have that experience. They aren't able to, they guard it like it's a secret. So if anybody ever says something like, oh, trust the process, or, just put your head down, they don't want to explain it. They either can't, well, they just can't. Typically they just can't, but they don't have the experience to be able to tell you that because they heard it from somebody else.
Yeah.
And that is garbage. You're paying that person for someone else's information. Why wouldn't you go to the person that they got their information from or they're being trained by?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Plus, it's a game of telephone. And that's why, even though I don't agree with how abrasive he is, that's why Dr. Lane Norton was great when he came out when he did, because he challenged everything.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Like, he was needed at the time, especially in the world of nutrition. Just because Skip and I will experiment doesn't mean it's going to work the same for you, but I still want somebody who's at least tried it to see what it works for them.
Exactly.
And then one last thing I want to say with your experiment, because when you said it, it made a lot of sense to me. And that spurred me to do my experiment as well. But the 1 week on, 1 week off is not for beginners. This is somebody who's put in decades of training, because every movement is a skill. Motor learning is a real thing. It takes 10,000 hours to be an expert, is the common saying. I don't know how factually true that is. That's me parroting something. But if you're a beginner, even an intermediate, like, I would say you're not doing what Skip did if you haven't trained for a minimum of 5 years, in my mind, because you need experience, right? You
don't even have the experience to read the feedback and the signs of really what is going on. You think you do. I know. I thought I did it 5 years too. Then it went 10 years.
Correct.
And I didn't know what I was. I didn't know how to read that feedback.
Performance chiropractic and sports medicine in the Houston Bay Area, telemedicine and nutrition coaching all over Texas. And if you're not in Texas, don't worry. You still do consults through the educatedmeathead.com, where you also find workout programs, seminar recordings, and online courses.
We've talked about this before. If you don't look back at what you're doing even 3 years ago and think it was trash, you're not improving.
Exactly.
Like,
or at least it hasn't evolved. Maybe not trash, but yeah.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Let's do this. I do want to touch on the structure of how we approach sets. I don't want to forget that. And one of the main things that I do, the kind of parameters that I give clients, is this. I want the sets to be roughly, because people want that black and white. They want to be able to go, okay, I'm in this area. Roughly about 70% of their normal weight. Okay, there are poundages. Doesn't have to be exact, but that's the ballpark area you want to be in. And even though I'm not a reps and reserve guy, I am during a deload. I am a train to failure guy during a blast. Okay, I just think that people need to train to failure, or as close to failure as possible, because that makes it black and white. So it's far more, it's easier to read and assess that way versus, to me, reps and reserve. And I say reps and reserve, it's like, how many reps and reserve? I have no idea. Depending on my mentality that day, maybe I can get another rep, maybe I can't. But I think that there should be a couple reps left in the tank. You don't want to train to failure. You're basically training for a pump. You're training to create a stimulus but a low key, arguably non-stress, maybe not non-stress, but far less stressful environment, and just get the workout, work the muscle, get the hell out of there before you do something stupid and drop a weight on your toe or something that makes you go, oh, I shouldn't have been in there that day. The other reason I think it's important to train during deloads, aside from the fact that, you know, whether it's progress or not progress, is the psychological component of staying in. Bodybuilders are huge with structure. To be successful in the bodybuilding arena, you have to thrive on structure, not only with the training, but with the nutrition, with your sleep and everything else. It's all consuming. Even if it's in the off season, even if your diet isn't 100%, it's still all consuming. All those things in your 24 hours every day contributes to your progress, your growth, your recovery, arguably your health, everything. So training keeps you with that structure versus not training. That's one of the things when I would be off every other week. Yes, I got a lot more work done, but you kind of feel lost because a lot of us, training is therapeutic as well. If you put in enough years, that's your therapy. You're gonna save a lot of money paying a therapist by having that time, that reprieve, that respite from all the other stresses, whether it be your marriage, whether it be financial, whether it be business related, whatever, your girlfriend wife battle that you're trying to balance, you know, whatever you have going, you need that time. So training also helps big time with the psychological component, even if all things are equal as far as progress and recovery if you're not training.
Yeah. I like it. So yeah, so reps in reserve, we've talked about this before. You've got to know where failure is. There was a study, I'm going off the top of my head. They asked people to go to 1 rep in reserve on a leg press. Guess what? When they went to failure after that, they did on average 10 more reps. So like it's way more advanced to do reps in reserve, right? Who are the big proponents of reps in reserve? It's, you know, Jared Feather, Mike Israetel. Those guys have been training for decades. Dr. Dean St. Mark now, he's doing the reps in reserve thing. He was a big DC guy in the past. What's the common theme of people who are successful with reps in reserve? Paul Barnett's another one. They did failure training for years and years and years and years. It is so much more advanced to do true 1 RIR in my mind than going to failure because it's a feel, right? Because you don't have that black and white.
Right.
Yep. Typically, I'm a lot more loosey-goosey, so to speak, on deloads, depending on the person, right? I don't work with a lot of people one-on-one. It's mostly workout subscriptions when people have been with me for years, where I'll go, you're going to do 1 or 2 sets per body part. You have the option of, you know, pump style sets, light load, do movements you haven't done. Try and experiment and create something new.
Exactly.
You're not going to failure. If you can't do that, do blood flow restriction. If you can't do that, maybe consider taking a week off. Like everybody's different, but
Right.
you're not going to barbell back squat if you've been barbell back squatting on your training blast. You're just not, right? Maybe do a god awful erotic asphyxiation front squat if you're into that type of stuff, right? Like change it slightly. You're only going to do 1 or 2 sets is typically what I do. I'm a big fan of blood flow restriction. I'm a big fan of get outside in nature and go for walks or hikes, right? Got a little bit of hippie in me. I believe in getting out in nature and getting barefoot on the ground is beneficial, right? That's just me. People might groan at that, but I feel better if I do that. I do like you giving parameters of the 70% load. I do like that. That makes sense to me. That kind of matches up with some of the research I cited. So I like that. I'm just a little bit more, just have fun. Try and invent something. You are not going to failure. Play around, lower volume, get in, get out. Maybe 2, maybe 3 training sessions of lifting weights that week. Otherwise, enjoy life. 1 year I had to take 2 whole months off at the end of the year because I got sick and had an injury. Or no, I had PRP done and I got sick. Man, when I came back for 2 months, the amount of tissue I put back on, I catapulted to where I was before.
Mm-hmm.
But psychologically, I can't handle 2 months off a year. I know
Right.
I would feel better and arguably maybe grow better or the same because you're resensitizing to everything, which is bro science, but it makes sense to me. But psychologically, I can't handle it.
I used to do that. I would take off November and December back when I competed a lot. It worked because it was the holidays. It also worked for me because that is a slow time where I'm taking in clients who are paying me to start at the beginning of the year, but I don't have plans to put together yet because they're not starting. They would just lock their spots in for the first of the year. So it was very, very slow for me. It allowed me to spend that time with family, allow my body to kind of decompress, inflammation to be down, that sort of thing. Sometimes it would be 2 months where I just did not train at all. And I would come back that next year fresh and just feeling great. It was, I called it the Kevin Levrone approach, if you will. And I want to add one thing before we smash or pass, because I think this is important. A lot of people will, I get this from clients, a lot of people will say, I have a vacation coming up in 4 weeks, so I'm going to put off my deload and I'm not going to train during the time I'm on vacation. Bad idea. Mainly because if you're going to purposely push when your body is telling you not to, and you're not listening to the signs because you have a vacation coming up, you're asking for trouble. You'd be better off continuing to take your proactive deload for one of those weeks than still training hard for 3 weeks. And then if you can't train, you can't train. You have a week that you're still going to recover. That falls back to the mentality of, while I'm gone, I'm not going to be, I'm going to regress. I'm not going to be, big. I'm not, and we all have that psychological. I know I've not trained on vacation before, and after 4 days, I feel like I'm small or something. It's a, dysmorphic type of thing that we deal with psychologically, but you got to get over that hump. You got to see the value in the deload, primarily proactively, but reactively as well, and make sure that, again, it's big picture shit. It's the long term. It's not tomorrow. It's not how I feel now. It's how is this going to pay off in the future? So that being said, go ahead. If you got something to add, go ahead.
One last thing is, and this is really big in the world of powerlifting, but just to make a point, because I work with some just insanity, like not mutants. It's so much fun, right? I will never know what it's like to put 925 pounds on my back and go up and down. Matt Wenning talks about this, and I completely agree. Get a bar off of your back if you've been smashing heavy ass squats or heavy ass deadlift, right? You're having little micro fractures and trauma to your spinal column. You need that to heal, right? So if you've done a lot of super heavy spinal loading, right? I saw a video of a bodybuilder. He squatted 885 for a set of 3. Good God almighty. Impressive shit, right? I will never know what it's like. But like, you've got to let your bones recover, not just connective tissue, right? So that's another reason of preventing horrible stuff down the line. You've got to cycle through that stuff, right? Because it's not normal. Now, yes, your bones are going to be super dense. We take certain supplements that make bone growth even more, right? That typically bodybuilders do, not strength athletes. But still, you've also got to let other areas of your body recover too. It's not just connective tissue. It's not just muscle tissue. So that's a lot of things. A lot of people be surprised, especially when I bring it up in office with super high level. They've done like 5 meets in a row in 5 months. I'm like, when's the last time you didn't have a bar on your back? Oh, it's been 2 years. I'm like, you've got to take a break. You've got to take a break. So that's my last little caveat. Yep.
Smash or pass.
These are always so climactic.
Exactly.
Like, they're so, I'm sure everybody's just gnawing on their nails. The biggest thing is I am now smashing proactive deloads where maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I would have passed on that. So that is a relatively, within the last few years, I am doing more proactive than reactive.
And I brought the posit up for the reason that it's a huge, huge smash for me. Proactively, consistently, with a pattern, to take those proactive deloads. I'm not going to pass on reactive deloads, but I want to unless they're absolutely necessary.
And then you need to figure out why that happened.
Absolutely. And I even think that when you're on vacation, even though I've done it, I go on vacation, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to unplug from bodybuilding, because this is, to say it's all consuming is one thing, but we work in the industry. So for those who are listening, they say, oh, my training and my diet and everything is all consuming. Try 24 years of not only doing that, but also training clients and, kind of being on call, if you would. I do client work when I had the kids at Disneyland or, Disney World. So if I'm on vacation, I'm still doing client work. I don't unplug. Rarely do I unplug. So I think that when you're on vacation, I still think you should train fun, get a pump, get in the gym, get out, therapy, good for the mind, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So
I went to Carbon Performance here, which is Brandon Curry, Mark Lobleiner's gym, twice. It was awesome. Got to use machines I've never used before. My glutes are smoked because I did a standing Panada hip abduction machine that I've never used before. We're about to go hiking. I guarantee my glutes are going to cramp. Super fun, right? And it's a new environment. Walk around, play with new equipment you've never used. Like
Sure.
I know you want to do your baseball stadiums. Someone I was talking with my wife or future wife is from now on, I want to start going to gyms when we're traveling. I want to check out new spots and have fun. So, she went and did stuff with her family. Like, cool, I'll be gone. And it was a blast. It's super fun seeing what's out there, different gym cultures, different energy. This is a badass gym out here. So shameless plug for them.
And
it's
at
a
the
great
same
spot.
time, I think it's also good to, I'm always careful, because if I'm on vacation with my wife, I don't want to take too much time. I'm not going to spend 3 hours in the gym.
Correct.
I'm going to get in, I'm going to get out, I'm going to experience it, and then I'm getting back and spending time with my family or my kids in Milwaukee or wherever I am. You got a question? Let's transition into the listener question.
Question, then we'll see if we have time for a topic we've been trying to work in for weeks.
I know, right?
All right, so this is, and remember, Jeremy's going to be put in the drawing. We will be doing our spin the wheel shortly for the winner for June. So you've got an opportunity to win a bunch of stuff. So this is from @Jeremy Jose, Hoezee. Wedges under the toes for a stiff-legged or Romanian deadlift. Any benefit? I feel like I can target my hamstrings more over my glutes.
Can I guess, and you tell me if I'm right?
Go. Yep.
I think the elevation of the heel transfers the weight to the ball of the foot, primarily the big toe, and that's going to have more glute activation. Am I in the right ballpark? Okay. I figured as much, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so we've talked about before, I'm big on the foot tripod pressure, right? So your heel, I don't have my model with me. Pretend this is your big toe, the knuckle of your big toe, the knuckle of your pinky. And a lot of people lose pressure on that big toe knuckle, which means their arch isn't dropping, which is what we want. It's kind of caving and raising. The arch dropping rotates your entire lower leg, which is required to fully lengthen and fire the glutes. Now, what the wedge on the front of the toe will do is increase that pressure point, but that's not going to change hamstring activation. With that said, I will play devil's advocate of why somebody can make this argument. But I will say from years and years of doing this, I don't see it really translating. What somebody will argue is if I elevate the front, the weight might shift slightly forward now, which would increase what's called the hip extension demand, right? Which could increase that. However,
but it doesn't have to. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm going to
true.
say when most people do that, then their knee might shift farther forward or their knee might bend more, which takes that away. Because how would elevating your toes increase the stretch on the hamstring? The hamstring attaches to the top of your tibia or your lower leg. Yeah. And then a lot of people will then start to compensate through their low back. Now, if you are, and then I will say anecdotally from working with people, I think most bodybuilders, strongmen, powerlifters included, we have overly tight calves. We have overly tight plantar fascia, which will put tension in something called the superficial back line, which is on the screen right now, which is a line of fascia we've talked about. That's why if you want to loosen up your hamstrings, you roll out the arch of your foot for 1 minute. When you reach down and touch your toes again, your hands will hang lower and your hamstring will feel looser. So elevating that more is going to put a bigger stretch on that superficial back line, which will most likely take out all the perceived benefits, right? So that's why I don't think it'll directly impact it. However, this individual, Jeremy, said he feels it more in his hamstrings. Great. Like,
Right.
everybody's an N of 1, like we talked about, right?
Mhm.
So on paper in a vacuum, I don't think it'll increase hamstring engagement. I think it would increase glute engagement. But if you feel it more in your hamstrings, man, go for it. But just think about, how would elevating the front of your foot increase any sort of stretch on your hamstrings, right? Now, if you're somebody who's got, really mobile calves, they're doing all the tissue work that I'm a big proponent of. If you feel it in there, great. But a lot of people will preach that as, oh, you automatically do this from a hamstring. I disagree. To each their own. So, yeah. But I am stoked that you are picking up on my whole big toe knuckle soapbox that I get on every time we talk about
Honestly, if there's anything that has stuck out in the last 20 episodes that we have done that has really stuck in my brain, it is that cue of that big toe knuckle, not only for RDLs, but bent over rows, anything to keep the glutes activated, because they're stabilizing the lower back so much. T-bars, everything. I think it's part of the reason that a T-bar on a platform I like, because it has kind of a forward pull versus the floor. And it depends on the angle that you're pulling at. I totally get it. But it helps to drive and force that your weight into that big toe. And it's huge for lower back stability and to decrease the vulnerability of risk. And with my chronic lower back issues years ago, even though I've been injury-free for 9 years, it's still there. And I still go, I don't want to shit in the shower again. I don't want to have to deal with that. And then write about it. It's one thing to have it happen, but then it's another to be completely transparent, to help other people out, and have to admit publicly that you had to shit standing up in the shower every morning for 3 days, because sitting down on the toilet, I would spasm and get stuck on the toilet. So there's that.
So, but love the question. And I love the fact that this individual is experimenting with stuff. And again, just because we say it's one way it's not, scripture. It's not a lot of this is gray areas of experimenting and figuring out what works for you.
Exactly.
Yep.
On that note, I think I'm going to take us out.
Sounds good.
We got to get to getting. This is Skip and Dr. Marv splitting. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell. It should sound a little something like this. And if you didn't like the show, just pretend you did. Like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell anyway. We want to hear your questions, feedback, and any ideas you have about future topics in the YouTube comment section. If your question or topic is chosen and used on the show, you'll go into a drawing, and we will randomly choose one winner at the end of each month who will receive a 5-pound bag of TEAMSKIP Protein from TrueNutrition.com. Be sure to use the TrueNutrition.com link in the closing credits to save 10% on not just TEAMSKIP Protein, but every supplement they sell. Not only do I use my TEAMSKIP Protein with my clients, but other top prep guys have their clients use my protein because it's that good. Dr. Marv, how can someone reach out to you if they have questions or if they want to work with you?
Easiest way is Instagram at dr.marvin.saysdc. Also have theeducatedmehead.com. My performance chiropractic office is in the Houston Bay area. I do telemedicine for all of Texas. If you're not in Texas, you still do consults through the Educated Meathead. I did 3 of them within the last week or so, working on whether it's how to train around an injured shoulder labrum, stuff to do to improve posing. Like, there's almost anything I could talk about. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
If you have too much skin, aka body fat, go to teamskip.com and you'll find all of my contact information, including TeamSkip merch. Of course, you can follow me on Instagram, Intense Muscle. Keep in mind that this is a team of 3, not 2. Chris is the enigma behind the scenes, and he's responsible for the visuals and graphics, and he also plays a massive role in the creative process. This project would not work without him. So from all 3 of us, it's been a business doing pleasure with you. Join us again next week for another episode of Between Two Dumbbells.
Loading TeamSkip. Loading TeamSkip.